Like the Vichy police captain in Casablanca, I was shocked to discover, thanks to the expenditure of millions of pounds by Rupert Murdoch's Sunday Times and the British state-owned Channel 4, and thousands of investigative journalistic hours, that Russell Brand was a rapacious, misogynistic sex addict. Not just a sex addict, but a heroin addict and an alcohol addict, and addicted also to himself. And his self-obsessive narcissism is a significant part of this story. But I was shocked, weren't you, that a man who told us many hundreds of times in public, on the stage, on television, and in books, had a shocking attitude to women and to sex. Mind you, it didn't stop a large number of women. He says more than 1,000 women. And who am I to doubt him? Going into his bedroom for what I assume was not a putative game of Scrabble or Tiddlywinks or, I don't know, gin rummy. Presumably people went to Russell Brand's bedroom knowing he was Russell Brand. Now, the much hyped Channel 4 and Sunday Times exclusive, on which they expended more journalistic effort than, for example, the client list of Jeffrey Epstein and his paramour, Miss Maxwell. Not a bad British angle on a story, you might thought. Sunday Times, Channel 4 reveal the full list of those to which Ghislaine Maxwell were ferrying and carrying underage girls for illicit, illegal sex. Now that would be insight. That would be an effort worthy of the term journalistic practice. But we are asked to believe that all of these millions and all of these thousands of man-woman hours of British journalism's finest was honestly expended to bring down a comedian. Seriously? We'll come to what the other purposes might have been. But let's deal with some things right up front. I don't know Russell Brand. I've only met him once. He's never done any favour for me. In fact, quite the contrary. And I absolutely deplore, as does he, the misogynistic savagery of his attitude towards women in that period of his life in which he was, and told us so, rapaciously promiscuous, a predator of the worst kind, a predator you would not wish any woman, let alone your own daughters, to be involved with. He's 48 years old. This period lasted roughly half of his life. But it's 20 years gone, the heroin addiction. He still attends Narcotics Anonymous. Indeed, still works hard to help other people addicted to the evil of drugs. I don't know if he was still drinking at the time of the oldest of the allegations now levelled against him, which is 16 years, during which we never heard any whisper of these allegations, certainly not in the mainstream media, because they were actually employing Russell Brand at the time. At the time that these allegations are stated to have occurred, Russell Brand was a media darling on the BBC and on Channel 4. But I don't know when he stopped drinking. I only know that he stopped taking heroin in 2002, more than 20 years ago. The oldest of these allegations dates back to 2006, and the most recent of these allegations is 10 years ago. no report to the police about Russell Brand's conduct in these 4 cases showcased by the media this weekend has ever been made. In fact, so far as we know, even yet has not been made. The people making the allegations were, of course, represented by silhouettes or actors or both. And it looked and sounded that way, didn't it? No police report of any crime currently stands against Russell Brand, even though the Metropolitan Police today, in the wake of the story, have asked what they call victims to come forward. Victims that have not yet appeared. Now, if the allegations against Russell Brand of sexual assault and rape are well-founded, the place for them to be dealt with is in a court of law, where people will have to give evidence not for a check, but under oath, where people will have to tell their story in front of the person they are accusing and in front of their lawyers, will have to be cross-examined. Forensic evidence will have to be adduced. Telephone evidence, text messages, and the like will have to be adduced. None of that has happened so far for Russell Brand. He has been subjected to the kind of trial by television, trial by accusation of the medieval kind. Now, I've been in this picture before. I could show you my scars incurred in defense of Julian Assange. Remember those? Remember those who were demanding that Julian Assange be deported to Sweden to face what turned out to be absolutely fake accusations of sexual misconduct, sexual assault, and rape. I said they were fake at the time. I said they were a transparent attempt to get Assange out of Britain to a country more likely to extradite him to the United States of America to face his real charge, which was to embarrass and expose the crimes of the American empire and other empires in his role as WikiLeaks publisher-in-chief. I was right about Julian Assange and all those people who turned on him at the first whiff of these allegations turned out to be wrong, if not turned out to be hypocrites. In fact, some of my own comrades who shunned and blacklisted me because of my defense for Assange are now to be found on the front lines of demonstrations demanding the release of the very same Julian Assange they had implicitly denounced as a rapist back at the time. Less well known and definitely less eminent. Alex Salmond, the erstwhile First Minister of my country of Scotland, erstwhile leader of the Nationalist Separatist Party, the SNP, a man whose politics I abhorred, but whose character I knew well, having spent decades in the British Parliament with him. He was falsely accused of sexual crimes. Seems it's the go-to when someone inconvenient has to be gotten rid of. A majority women jury at the High Court in Edinburgh cleared Salmond of these charges, and he walked free but destroyed as a political figure of substance. These allegations against Brand should be investigated by the police. As far as I could see from my reading, it's the police in Los Angeles that would have to do the investigating, because the alleged crimes, as opposed to appalling behavior, are alleged to have happened in Los Angeles. Have they? Have they even yet received a report of a crime in Los Angeles? And if they have, will they wonder, as I do, why the people making these accusations have waited until now to make them? Russell Brand is apparently fond of saying, ask yourself, why am I being told this? And why am I being told it now? And that's what I want now to move on to. Half of his life, Russell Brand behaved like a beast in the jungle or an animal in the fields. But the second half of his life has not been like that. He's now married with 2 young daughters. He's a pillar of charity fundraising for women's charities, for mental health charities, for drug addicts, for alcohol addicts, and I don't know, perhaps for sex addicts too. He has left his life of addiction. What has he done instead? Well, I don't watch his program, although 26 million people do. That's rather more of a circulation than the Sunday Times in a year. That's rather more than the viewership of ailing, failing Channel 4 television, which requires subvention from the British taxpayer even to continue to exist, and depends upon the goodwill of the British state and the British government. In these television shows, on YouTube, on Rumble, elsewhere on social media, what does Russell Brand nowadays talk about? He talks against the war in Ukraine. He talks against lockdowns. He talks against compulsory vaccinations. He talks against Big Pharma. And I just wonder, as may you, if it is that has brought Russell Brand right over the target. I wonder if it was Russell Brand's interview with Tucker Carlson, another man who talks against the Ukraine war, another man who talks about and against Big Pharma, another man who talks against lockdowns and the vax industry. By the way, Tucker, I hope you've led a blameless life, because if I'm any judge, you'll be the next person in their firing line. Or maybe it was Russell Brand's interview with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that so attracted him to the fire, the flack, the millions of pounds worth of flack from these 2 pillars of British state orthodoxy, the Sunday Times and Channel 4. We already know that Mr. Kennedy has not led a blameless life, though not as shameful as the first half of Russell Brand's life, I hope. Maybe they have other plans for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Because this weekend, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was almost murdered in the state of California, where his father was murdered, in the United States of America, where his uncle, the President of the Republic, was murdered. Thanks to his private security firm, a man pretending to be a U.S. Marshal with 2 guns in holsters under each arm and extra ammunition packed in case, was thwarted in what may very well have been an attempt to bring RFK Jr.'s increasingly strident and successful campaign to a shuddering halt. Why was this left to a private security company? And I take my hat off to them. Because Joe Biden, President Joe Biden, who has a bust of RFK Jr.'s father behind him in the Oval Office in the White House in Washington, who claims to be a follower of the original RFK, refuses to provide Secret Service cover for his opponent in the Democratic primaries for the presidency in 2024. Just think about that. A man whose uncle, President Kennedy, and whose father, Senator Kennedy, were both murdered in public, on duty. RFK is being refused the Secret Service cover that is routinely every day being provided for Hunter Biden. How low can Joe Biden sink? How low can the Democratic Party, so-called, of the United States sink? We may not have seen the bottom yet, but this is pretty low, Joe. This is pretty low. And lastly, a more whimsical example. A woman that British viewers will never have heard of. A congresswoman, a Republican, a Trump-supporting Republican, Lauren Boebert, a single woman, a divorcee, is dating a single man. And they went to a theater together. And miraculously, high-definition video has emerged of Congresswoman Boebert's breasts being fondled entirely consensually by her beau, who happens to be a Democratic Party supporting bar owner, whom she has been dating since her divorce. Now, admittedly, she's well blessed in the décolletage department. But it is remarkable that the video of Lauren Boebert being fondled and apparently enjoying it is clearer and much, much faster than any of the video from January 6th, the laughably described insurrection in Washington, D.C. Brand, Boebert, Kennedy, who will rid the establishment of these turbulent priests? That's the question you need to be asking yourselves. I told you to fasten your seatbelts. This is going to be a bumpy night. It's the mother of all talk shows.